last few days we've been looking at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States and the relationship between them both. You remember Thomas Jefferson? He largely wrote the Declaration of Independence. Others came in and amended it, but he wrote the draft. James Madison is the author largely of the Constitution. Neither of these men came up with new ideas in the formation of these very important documents. They unapologetically borrowed thoughts and ideas and words from things written in the Dark Ages. Thoughts of wise men. We looked at John Locke of England, Baron de Montesquieu of France. James Madison said, "The object was to assent to truth, not to discover truth." So the object was to agree to truth, not to discover truth. So what he was saying was these ideas were not new. We're simply stating that they are truth. And they've taken those truths and created law that supports a new government. And ever since the members of the representatives of this new government have taken office, have taken up position, whenever somebody takes up a position in that government, especially the President of the United States, they take an oath of office to uphold the principles that are in these two documents. The relationship between them is that the Declaration of Independence declares freedom. The Constitution guarantees freedom. But in the age that these documents were written and the government was formed, their understanding or their ability to even apply these principles was limited. So what they had to do was amend these laws expand them, clarify them, and they did that progressively. The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments, and the principles of that were given in the Magna Carta. So nothing new under the sun. These truths were being shared and fought for during the Dark Ages. So we also looked at the terms used to, they don't say declare freedom, guarantee freedom. The technical term is natural law and, do you remember? Positive law. What is a natural law? Self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal and I have the right to life, liberty and pursuit of happiness. Happiness. Positive law is how they can make these ideals how they can implement these ideals. We talked about how positive law and natural law mostly aren't the same. The ideal is to bring them as close together as possible. But that doesn't always happen. And that was the situation back in these late 1700s, in the 1800s. And why the necessity for amendments. Our speaker, the stone speaker, who's giving a loud cry to the world, has announced that the reason for the impeachment of Donald Trump is that he does not declare freedom. He does not serve his country. He undermines the Constitution of the United States that guarantees freedom. And he's doing that because he does not see all men as equal. He sees himself above men. He sees himself as a king and that he is above law. And that is why they're holding that inquiry. She thanked God that the founding fathers made that constitution amendable. These men and their compatriots understood that over time that the constitution would need enlarging. Because freedom needed time to be expressed. The world should be heading to utopia. As these laws get more and more understood and enforced, we should be seeing more freedom. But the reason we aren't is because of that not everybody holds to these ideals.
Nabuna da sangat lirei dan bati tamat todo presensa di ikilavina kana bakasama chiko kana bakasama rungo.
So just as you see internally in the church a message that divides two classes of people, there is a message in the world that's dividing two classes of people. And we in the church fail to see how we are connected to their message. And if we don't understand and declare their message, we will not have the power to give our own. Because their message is based on natural law that is self-evident. It's as plain as it's as plain as day. And yet it needs to be explained to us. So Donald Trump has decided to serve himself and not the people. I just want to pick up on this. These are key words. This stone is crying out. That should register with us. It's about freedom. Freedom is about restoration. And time. Freedom is connected with time. When we look at the amendments of the Constitution, Elder Jeff in her presentations, and if you haven't kept up, you've got a lot of homework to do. Oh, did I say that? Oh dear, sorry. Elder Tess. I had a late night. It's 2019. It's the 400th anniversary of what? 1618. 400th anniversary of the first slaves in America. That's why if you're searching external events, you will see a lot of documentaries, movies concerning slavery. Slavery is one of the key points connected with 2019. There is a movie that has just been released telling the story of the life of Harriet Tubman. We're Seventh-day Adventists. We don't go to movies. But watch the trailer on YouTube. What a woman. They were supposed to put her on one of the United States currencies this year. In celebration of the work that she did. She was a slave in the South and escaped to the North. But went back continually to bring her people back out of captivity into the North. It's called the Underground Railroad. Not only did she risk her life continually to go back, she got all her family out of the South to freedom and many others. Then she also led a regiment in the Civil War. Look up this woman. Watch the trailer. The world is being reminded of these things. There is another important documentary. It's called 13th Amendment. I'd recommend watching that as well. You'll find it easily on YouTube, 13th Amendment. Took 13 amendments to abolish slavery. And it hasn't been abolished. The consequences will disturb you. But we need to be shaken out of our Laodicean comfort. There's so much injustice in the world. It is also the 100-year anniversary of what? Women's rights. The right to vote. It's no coincidence that this is the what number amendment? The 19th Amendment. And it is also the 50th anniversary, 1969, of the Stonewall riots. What were the Stonewall riots? This was the beginning of gay rights. Leading up to this time, the police were violently attacking or oppressing the gay community in I think it's Greenwich, New York. Greenwich isn't. Stonewall is the name of one of their clubs that they used to go to. One night the police went in and the people said enough is enough. Because we are human beings and we have civil rights. And they rose up and they pushed those police out. And the police went out. And it began the gay rights movement in the United States. We need to understand what civil rights mean. What freedom for all men means. We need to get rid of our own prejudices. When people do not look or behave like us. They have the right to life and liberty and to pursue happiness. As long as they don't break civil laws. But when those civil laws are not, civil laws are positive laws. When they are not in accord with natural law, then the people rise up and it's called civil disobedience. So we're aware of the when we talk about civil rights, we usually think of the getting rid of segregation.
David tama ta kana bit kambal kan civil rights. David tama ta tingana kena kaulebi na ilachi chiko e burubur.
The rights of the coloured people of the United States and the rights of minorities. But the women's rights of 1919 was civil disobedience. It was about civil rights. And again, civil rights. But as I read from Speaker Pelosi the other day, they are still these rights are still not in law. They still need improving. And these are the bills that the House of Representatives keeps sending to the Senate. The Trump administration wouldn't even let a picture of Harriet Tubman be on any of their currency. They are showing us what they think of race and gender and other rights of minorities. Civil disobedience is when the people rise up against particular law. Revolution is when you rise up against the whole laws. When you say the Constitution, that the laws that guarantee our freedom are so far removed from natural law that we just want to change the whole government. But the people rose up in these time periods. They were just rising up about a particular law. The people that were during the time of the fight for civil rights, it's not just the black people that were persecuted. It was white people also who stood by their side. Same with women's rights. The men that stood by these women and wanted them to have the right to vote, they copped just as much flack as the women. And it is the same with these minority rights. Good men will stand with these people. Stones like Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Stones like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They take their stand with these people and they enter the war with them. So these people are saying we are not possessions and we are not animals. We are men. Male and female created he them. Which reminds me of Acts chapter 10. When you think of Peter, who spent 3.5 years at the feet of Jesus, he went through the trauma of the cross, the empowerment of Pentecost. He went from 27 AD to 34 AD. And God had to send a parable to him to remind him that horses and dogs and pigs were his people. He didn't get it. His ideas of Gentiles were so ingrained, God had to give him special light. When he acted on that special light, what was the response of his brethren? They needed some convincing. They needed to be convinced. And we know the end of the story. Once it was explained, they got on board. So that history is being repeated. And but we won't look into that parable today. So the impeachment of Donald Trump is because the president is undermining this constitution. Abusing power to further his own self-interests. By saying, I'm a king, I am above law. What that makes us is slaves. So half the United States is heading in the right direction and half the United States is heading in the wrong direction. So we want to take a look at slavery and how it relates to God's government. We started this week looking at Isaiah chapter 46. Isaiah 45. Which was a story of what? Captivity. And we spent some time looking at what takes people into captivity. Untruths and beliefs that have no evidence. So we can call that captivity 400, 70, 1260. Or we can also see the big picture of Eden to Eden. Now, Sister White would call this time period would describe this time period as the conflict of the ages. How many ages? More than one. But how many? Where do I get the term conflict of the ages from? How many books? How many ages? What's the first age? Patriarchs and prophets. What's the second age? What's the third age? The time of Christ. Yes, desire of ages. Fourth age. Fifth age. All the rest. Now we know that the patriarchs and prophets starts before Eden. Great controversy takes us past Eden. But in between is that history of captivity. And if you're in captivity, you're in slavery. So man went into slavery in Eden. He went under the curse. At the end of the world, that curse will be removed. Did man go under the curse straight away in Eden? There was actually a progression. Sister White talks about how that curse progressed slowly as sin developed. Eve didn't immediately experience childbirth pains, but they developed over time. They were still living in the Garden of Eden, so Adam didn't have to work the Garden of Eden by the sweat of his brow. They didn't die straight away. And we don't see slavery until the descendants of Cain. So we know the curse progressively comes in. At the end of the world, restoration progressively comes in. What are the words that Sister White starts this conflict of the ages off with? First three words, patriarchs and prophets. God is love. And the last three words of the great controversy? God illustrates the end from the beginning.
God illustrates the end from the beginning.
I'm going to read from Steps to Christ.
Steps to Christ.
No, I'm sorry. First of all, Patriarchs and Prophets 33.1.
Patriarchs and Prophets.
We'll read that first paragraph. God is love. She quotes 1 John 4:16. And she says, his nature, his law is love. His nature and his law. Who he is as a being. And how he operates externally. Both are love. It ever has been, ever will be. And then she quotes some Bible texts. Every manifestation of creative power is an expression of infinite love. And then she goes on to quote some more spirit of prophecy. Some more Bible verses, some Psalms. So what manifests? What is an expression of infinite love? Every manifestation of creative power. So God is love, is natural law. It does not need proof. When we see God's creation, it tells us that God is love. We don't have to prove that. It is as plain as day. I'm going to quote from Steps to Christ, page 9.1. Nature and revelation alike testify of God's love. Our Father in heaven is the source of life and wisdom and joy. And she tells us to look at the things of nature, to think on the marvelous things that God has created for our happiness. She talks about the sunshine and the rain that make the earth happy. That they all speak of the Creator's love. The way He supplies the daily needs of all His children. When man was made perfectly holy and happy, the earth had no decay or shadow of the curse. But it was the transgression of God's law, the law of love, that brought the curse. So when man transgressed, he broke the law of love. She says that God's love is written upon every opening bud. And every piece of grass. She talks about the birds and the trees. That all creation testifies of God's love. So everybody should understand the love of God. But all men do not understand how God's love works. They do not understand His nature and His law. So, God is love. Another being fought against this law of love. We understand the fall of Lucifer. Satan introduced a new principle. What's the opposite of love? Let me read from Steps to Christ, page 17. When God created man, He gave him a well-balanced mind, noble qualities and powers. Man was perfect in his being, in harmony with God. His thoughts were pure and his aims were holy. But through disobedience, his powers were perverted. His affections were misplaced. And his high and holy purposes were lowered. And she says something took the place of love. She says selfishness took the place of love. What is the opposite of love? Selfishness. How do we understand the relationship between them both? Let's go back and understand what love is. So, love is law. It's law and nature. How does selfishness become law and nature? Patriarchs and Prophets 34.3. 34.3. The law of love being the foundation of the The law of love is the foundation of God's government.
Na ibunaw ni loma na iabu ni na mati itu na
I'll
kalau.
paraphrase, the happiness of intelligent beings depends on it.
Another marau na bika mbuli may loma langi iabu tekitu na ibunaw.
Now, just think about what we've been studying this week.
Kaya mo dapat kasama na bika na buli mchana malango.
What's the foundation of the government of the United States?
Dapat na iabu ni mati itu si Amerika.
The Declaration of Independence.
Declaration of Independence.
The Declaration of Independence says that our happiness, the pursuit of happiness, is inculcated in that Declaration of Independence. Our happiness is given, I should say described, in that declaration.
Sorry. Ni Declaration of Independence ka wala din natin to Amerika e wala ito kinanon na maraw na kautamata.
All our happiness depends on us being in accord with that law.
Nondam tiko maraw na tamata sema baka binaka wate kina bunawongo.
If we're in accord with the law of love, that's what brings us happiness. God takes no pleasure in forced obedience. And to all. So does he force us to love him? That wouldn't make him happy. He takes no pleasure in it. So what has he granted to us? Freedom of will, that we may all render him voluntary service. Love is dependent upon freedom. You cannot have love without freedom. Patriarchs and Prophets 35.1.
Patriarchs and Prophets,
so long as all created beings acknowledged the allegiance of love, if all created beings acknowledged love, there was perfect harmony in the universe. It would have been our joy to fulfill the purpose of our Creator. We would delight in reflecting His glory and praising Him. And while love to God was supreme, love for one another was confiding and unselfish. Is it enough to love God? We have to love one another. If we love God, then we are unselfish to each other. So let me read that again. While the love to God was supreme, love for one another was unselfish. What does it mean to be unselfish? We're not serving our own interests, we're serving others' interests. She says there was no note of discord to mar the celestial harmonies. But a change came over this happy state. There was one who perverted the freedom that God granted to His creation. So Satan is selfish. His laws and his nature is selfish. What did he do with freedom? He perverted freedom. What does perverted freedom look like? What does that mean? We won't read that for time. I'll paraphrase. So Lucifer, he left the presence of the Father. And he went to the angels and he spread a spirit of discontent. What does it mean to be discontented? You're not happy with current circumstances. But he worked in secrecy. He concealed his purposes. He began to insinuate doubts about God's law. And how they are being governed. He said, laws are necessary for all those worlds out there, but not for us angels here. We're above law because we're holy. He said we've got enough wisdom to be our guide. We can't bring dishonor to God. Our thoughts are holy. It's no more possible for us to err than it is for God to err. He talked about the Son being equal with the Father. The equality between the Son and the Father. And he said that was an injustice. That he should be on that level as well. That he was entitled to reverence and honor. And if he could be raised to that level, then the angels would find true happiness. And they would secure freedom for all. So we don't need law. We're not like them. Raise me to the position I should be in, and I'll guarantee your freedom. Right now, when he started doing that, Sister White says that's where their liberty ended. Right then, they had chosen an absolute ruler. The choice to follow that discontented messenger, took away their freedom. And they did not realize they were now following a king, a monarch, a despot. That they would have to answer to his authority and give him homage. And that's how subtle the deception was. The loyal angels were arguing with them. But what Lucifer did was he said that they were deluded slaves. What did he accuse the faithful angels of being? Slaves. Skip that. He had determined that he would claim the honor that was given to Jesus, to the Son for himself.
Kwa sabi na katoko me kota keda na baroro kwa solitu bichisu misanona.
And that he would take command of all those that followed him.
Kasara taruko na tutu ni belutaki nge lutekira rando murikwa.
And he promised them a better and a new government
Kasaya takabira indo tala na matitu binaka na matitu.
under which all would enjoy freedom.
Karena lewa na erna marota keda na ngala na sulio ko ni.
And great numbers of the angels believed in what he was saying and followed him.
Lewa takabira na ngilosi apanga butiko kasa murikwa.
They were flattered
Era lasutaki.
and they were flattered and they hoped to gain that same equality with God himself. And also to be obeyed by the rest of the heavenly host. So what did those angels think they were going to be? They too thought they could be like Lucifer and have angels give them homage. They didn't realize they were selling themselves into slavery and were going to follow an absolute ruler. Sister White goes on to say that Satan had gone too far, he couldn't go back. But that wasn't the case for the fallen angels. There were loyal angels that were able to persuade them to come back on the right side. There was still a door of hope. Had they all heeded the warning, they would have broken away from the snare of Satan. But there were three things that kept them: pride, love for their leader, and the desire for unrestricted freedom. What does perverted freedom look like? It's unrestricted. What kept those angels in bondage to Satan was their own pride, their love for their leader, thank you, and the desire for unrestricted freedom. Satan is offering them freedom, but it's perverted. God is offering freedom. What kind of freedom does God offer us? Satan's freedom is unrestricted. God's freedom is restricted. What restricts God's freedom? Law. God is love, is natural law. But in order to guarantee natural law, you have to have law that is restricting. This is positive law. God's laws are positive. So we have the original law, God is love. We have man and woman, male and female created he them in the Garden of Eden. They're surrounded by creation. God is love needs no explaining. They're surrounded by the proof. They're granted freedom. Are there restrictions on their freedom? What's their restriction?
Nada bona lawa era vaudi kina.
You can't eat of that tree.
Iku sin radio lekana na bun kau tambu.
What does the Constitution do for the Declaration of Independence?
Nada bona kata kawan ya bulawa kina Declaration of Independence.
The Supreme Law guarantees the liberties that are given in the Declaration of Independence.
Na ya buni bulawa e bakan data ka na ngalala e bolai ci Declaration of Independence.
It protects that freedom.
E maroro ya na ngalala ka tukina.
In order to protect freedom, you have to have law. The restriction of their diet and their behavior in the Garden of Eden was what guaranteed their liberty. Satan came down as that serpent and offered to Eve what? Unrestricted freedom. If your freedom is unrestricted, you'll rise to our level. You'll be as God. But what inadvertently did she do? She became his slave. The end of unrestricted freedom is slavery. Wasn't called slavery in Genesis chapter 3. What was it called? A curse. Who fell under the curse? Them. They were given life. They were given liberty. They were told, pursue happiness. Go forth and multiply. That's pursuing happiness. But their life was cut short. Their liberty was taken away. And their pursuit of happiness was perverted. We spoke of John Locke, the father of liberalism that gave the ideas for the Declaration of Independence. His words were quoted. What he said was liberty, but not license. Liberty, but not license. You are not free to do anything you want. Satan said, you're free to do anything you want. Donald Trump is saying, I'm free to do anything I want. And rejects the idea that he's been restricted by law. The law of the Constitution that gave 3 articles to separate the powers. So we move from Adam and Eve. We go to the story of Cain and Abel. They were given life and liberty in the pursuit of happiness. But were their liberties restricted? Were their activities did law dictate how they were to behave? I'm sorry, my brother. So we realise that with Cain and Abel, Cain denied Abel his life and his liberty and the pursuit of happiness. He killed his brother. they were to come and worship God
Andun merola kumai meroming karavan kalu.
in freedom,
Enangalal tulgako.
but was that freedom restricted?
Angalalan go itu bakalau.
Yes, you had to worship God in a certain way.
Iyo, andun mekenda karavan kalu. Nendo nakene bakarau.
They were to worship God according to God's will.
Andun merong karavan kalu. Beba kasaran na loma ni kalu.
Abel said, I will comply with your conditions.
Kau pelewam do bata patikena nomu lawa.
Cain said, I think I'll make my own religion,
Okay, ni siya ngau nabulenga na lawa.
but I'll still worship the true God.
Yo namo anong karavan chunga na kalundina.
And we know how that all ended.
Dakilawi na kene cincin tanong.
When God came down to investigate,
Ningon siro mekin ang turang may kakawan na watin.
God said to Cain,
Tukuna ko bikeni.
where's your brother?
Yo tanimu.
And Cain responded by saying,
Kakeni.
am I my brother's keeper?
Yung biya kanak ngam daw bakataw ni tanimu.
What, is he his brother's keeper?
Ano na bakataw na tanimu?
Yes. We are our brother's keeper.
Kenda, and na bakataw ni tanimu.
Why?
Tawa na muna.
Because we're unselfish.
Berarti ni siya bikenda ang daw nanu bikenda nga.
The law of love is not just our love for God,
Nalawa ni lo may siya nga nga nang dalo mo wana
it is our love for men,
Chiptong akin ang dabi.
for human beings, for all men.
Tama ta tugo ko.
Selfishness
Daw nanu bikenda nga bakati bikenda.
takes away our love for all men.
Ko tele bi nang dalo mo.
That leads to slavery.
Dili ba ko na bi ba kan bombo.
And these were the things that the people of the Dark Ages were understanding,
Ngona kara kila na buku e na ngori di buto.
is when you have a king or a despot,
Ni ngona chukki na kena mali.
a dictator,
Ento ba kasura ta ki.
everybody else is a slave.
Tama ta ke e na mama bubu.
So God's natural law of love
Nalawa national law ni lo manikalo.
brings freedom.
Ko te bikenda na ngala.
It's a restricted freedom governed by laws.
Endo na ngala e vau di na ndone bunao.
Those laws guarantee that freedom.
Pero ni bunongo e ba ndi ta kana ngala ngo.
And the result is what?
Zama ke cincin.
If the result of Satan's course leads to slavery,
Kane cincin no ngala te boro e ado e be mo mo ta ki.
okay, equality. My sister says equality.
Na bi ba ka tutu ba ka ki.
What does equality look like?
Na ta na yala lo ni bi ba ka tutu ba ka ki.
What does love look like?
Zama na yala lo.
Look what we've got. Law, nature, freedom, restrictions. What should we put here?
Nakalungan ka.
Turn to Philippians chapter 2.
Slave. Kira namin dalaray ba na Philippi?
Philippians. Philippians chapter 2.
Philippi na kinawa si Rua.
We'll start in verse 1.
Andra tegabu na
Philippians 2 verse 1.
wasi Rua tikinen dua.
Would you like to read that? Read the first two verses.
Verse 1.
Philippians chapter 2 verses 1 and 2.
Ia ke wakasatu na vei wakavengui e na buku Karisto, se tu na vei wakaleraki ni loloma, se tu na vei lomani ni alo tambu, se tu na alo loloma ke na alo vinaka, mundu wakayador sar na nungu marau, mundu loma bata kina, mundu toto bata ena loloma, mundu loma bata, mundu yalo bata.
Paul says,
Tukuna Paula,
if there's any consolation in Christ,
ke wakain dua na vei wakavengui e na buku Karisto,
if Christ has done anything for you and your life,
ke wakain dua na kai wakavei ko chisu ke na nungu mbula,
then fulfill my joy
kere mundu wakayador na nungu marau.
and have that same respect for other people.
Ka o ka tira tala kira na tamatara chuka.
Be in one accord with others.
Ndo wa ta batikira tamatara chuka sama.
Don't do anything through strife or vainglory.
Kuni vakawa indona kaya na makasama nga ni visi se dokdokai kenda nga vaka.
No decisions or actions because you are angry or you are proud.
Kuni vakawa indona dingin balaka ni ko bundru se ko dokdoka.
But in lowliness of mind, esteem others better than yourself.
Ye mendo katira tamata ni ra lebu zaki mai bikenda.
Look not every man on your own things, but every man also on the things of others. Are you to stop looking on your own things? No, take care of yourself, but also look after others. And then he says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. What's the this? Let this mind of esteeming others better than yourself, of being your brother's keeper, be in you. And then he gives the example of Christ. Because Christ was in the form of God. He was spirit. God is spirit. He was in that form. He thought it not robbery to be equal with God. But he took upon him, he made himself of no reputation. Verse 7. He took upon him the form of a what? That word in the Greek is stronger than servant. He became a slave. What does slavery look like? He was equal with the Father. Did he have equality? But he looked not on his own things, but also on the things of others. He showed us what the law of love was to look like. And it looks like slavery. Because we are our brother's keeper. There is a freedom that is of God and a freedom that is of the devil. There is a slavery that is of God and a slavery that is of the devil. Jesus came to show us what slavery looked like. That's what we're signing up for. Slavery brings sacrifice. But slavery is the end result of love. Of being so bound to our brothers and sisters. Of being bound to our brothers and sisters. In chains of love. So, God is love is the natural law. Man fell, but God wants to bring about restoration. And man doesn't understand love anymore. So God's got to codify that love. He's going to write out in a simple way what love is to look like. And we call that codified love what? The 10 Commandments. So God is love is the natural law. God is love is our declaration of independence. It says that we are free. But the 10 Commandments is the Constitution. It's what guarantees the freedom. We do not have unrestricted freedom.
ni taro binanonda chikmala.
God is looking after us because we don't know what love looks like anymore. So he writes it on a table. Is it perfect? Yes. Does it need amending? What is the purpose of amending law? To expand it, to clarify it. Case in point, let's go back to Exodus chapter 20. So we did this through the week. We looked at Exodus chapter 20. Because what does God want to do? He wants to restore us. He's a merciful God because it's been 6,000 years. And while there's definitely been improvements, it's been a long, hard slog. Long, hard work. But God designed that every seventh day there was to be restoration. We read the seventh commandment. On the seventh day, man was to not work by the sweat of his brow. The curse was lifted. What was to remind them of that? Why would they keep the Sabbath? God tells us in the first 2 verses, the preamble to the declaration, to the Constitution. God spake these words and said, I am the God that brought you out of captivity. I brought you out of slavery. I brought you out of Egypt. You're not going to have any other gods beside me. You're not going to lie or steal. Because I brought you out of slavery. I'm offering you a better form of slavery. A slavery that gives homage to the Creator God, that loves Him with free will, because He brought us out of slavery, and also has love for our fellow man. We're going to honour our parents and not lie and steal and not covet our neighbour's possessions. Because what are our neighbour's possessions? They're the pursuit of his happiness. So within that 4th commandment is a freedom from a curse for one day of the week, where they have dominion. Over who? Over their daughters, sons and their daughters, and over who? Who are they? Do you think this constitution might need some amending? What's the problem? They've got slaves. Where's God going to amend this constitution?
Nangon salakava ena baka binakatakira na constitution go na karo.
7 days shalt thou worship and do no work. What's its parallel passage? Go to Leviticus chapter 25. Leviticus 25. What did God tell his people to do? Speak to the children of Israel, verse 2. When you come into the land, what do you have to do? You have to rest it every 7th year. Not only that, but every Jubilee or every 50th year, you're going to do more than that. Why did God want to rest the land? Does God love his dirt? That he really wants to take care of dirt? Who's he taking care of? Go to verse 10. What were they to do every 50th year? They were to proclaim liberty throughout all the land. Every 7th day, man and woman, that curse was lifted. Were they the only ones cursed? Who else received a curse? The descendants of Canaan. Descendants of Cain and the descendants of Canaan. Because they were to be slaves. And God amended those 10 commandments and provided a way for those that have been in slavery to be lifted out of it. Everybody here knows the 25-20. It's our bread and butter. A lot of us come into this message because of the 25-20. But have we understood the principles of the 10 Commandments, of the Constitution, that are protecting our independence, our freedom? Verse 14 says, if thou sell aught unto thy neighbour, or borrowest aught of thy neighbour's hand, ye shall not oppress one another. Verse 17, ye shall therefore not oppress one another. It wasn't about the dirt. It was how they were treating their fellow human beings. So were they allowing them to regain the same rights that they were able to enjoy? Go to verse 35. If thy brother gets poor, if he finds himself in bad circumstances, if he falls in decay, what are we to do? We're to relieve them. Do we stand back and we look at that family and go, look at the state they're in? Look at the circumstances that they're living in. We are to help them. We are to give them help without interest. What does that mean? We are to help them without receiving anything in return. Why?
Tama na buna?
Verse 38.
Tikini tor sungul kawalong.
Because I'm the God that brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Pero ya una kalawa kuchikim dumay na.
I delivered you out of bondage.
Iwa sirikim dumay na bebang bolta.
Go and deliver your brother out of bondage. Or stand there like Lucifer and say, we're not like those other worlds. We don't need this law. We're holier than them. Well, we know what happened to the children of Israel. Did they keep the law? Did they keep the Sabbath? Did they keep the seventh year Sabbath? Did they rest the land and take care of those in need? They never did it once. They broke the covenant. They never did it. That meant the rich got richer and the poor get poorer. Understand, that's the essence behind civil disobedience in the United States at the moment. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. They ended up with patriarchs. The God's people had patriarchs. Those patriarchs developed into kings. 3 kings. And then the kingdom divided. Actually, I'll just draw it differently. Let's draw it how we would normally draw it. The kingdom divided. And there was, because they were under the dictatorship of Solomon. And what happened with Solomon? The rich got incredibly rich. And the poor, especially of those northern kingdoms, said enough is enough. The laws aren't equal. We're breaking away, we're creating our own government. Sorry, brother. We're breaking away, we're creating our own government. They failed to learn the lesson. And there was just as much despotism in the northern kingdom as the southern kingdom. But we get to a year, 742, when there's civil war. You know the prophecy that within 65 years, what was going to happen? Within that time period, which was 19 years, the northern kingdom was taken captive. They were in captivity, in bondage, first by Baal, then by Jezebel. By first paganism, then papalism. If you didn't believe that was going to happen, what was going to happen to you? You wouldn't be established. So 46 years later, the southern tribes get taken captive. We know the dates. We know the numbers. We can do the math. Then we add another 19, and we come to what date? And what's happening? Civil war. The dates, the numbers, the beautiful chiasm we're all familiar with. Do we understand the principles? What brought them to this was slavery. God declares the end from the beginning. That's what gives us our substance and our evidence that we don't have blind faith. And we see civil war. Brother against brother. Inequality. Church went into a Laodicean condition. And in that Laodicean condition, it's in bondage for how long? The 126. 1 to 6 years of paganism, 1 to 6 years of papalism, but combined, which brings us to 1989. What's the issue going to be? Slavery. Now, there are similarities and there are differences. Slavery here looked different to the slavery down here. Slavery here is going to look different to the slavery. We know that the end issue is going to be slavery. And it's also going to involve law. What's the law at the end of the world that will bring in slavery? We call it Sunday law. We should expect to lose freedom. We should also expect that Sunday law will be different to what we are expecting. It will be the counterfeit of the Sabbath. But if our understanding of the Sabbath is just limited to a number of days, and we have the freedom to go to church on the seventh day, that it's just about numbers, and we don't understand the principle of restoration that's in it, then what will our understanding of Sunday law look like? It'll just be about a number of days. And we won't recognize the principle. We call it a Sunday law. But when we understand the Sabbath and the design for the Sabbath, we will understand the child of the papacy, the Sunday law that will come in the not too distant future. Remember, Jesus came not to take away the law. He came to expand it, to clarify it, to amend it. It took a long time for those disciples to understand what law looked like. The law of love looked like a broken man on a crucifix. The ultimate sign of sacrifice for a fellow human being. If you think life gets difficult now, when we stand with our fellow human beings to fight for their life and liberty and pursuit of happiness, it's going to take us to the cross. We need to count the costs. So one of the things I want to leave us with is that God's love is restricted by law. God's love gives us freedom, liberty. It's liberty, not license. The wearing of pants is a symbol of that liberty. It's saying we stand with our men. We're dressing practically because we're going to work. When you work, you need to be practical. We're not dressing now to word escapes me. So, but that freedom that we have got now, that liberty, is not license. It is restricted by law. What laws? The laws of health, the laws of modesty. It's not unrestricted freedom to go out and wear whatever we want. If we think that, we've missed the point. And we've fallen for the arguments of Satan, who will make us a slave to fashion. That's not what it's about. What we see happening is that for 6,000 years, women have been very oppressed. We're so used to it, we don't see it as oppression. We think it's natural, and it's very unnatural. So sometimes when the sisters find their freedom, they want to fly higher than what God designed. The pendulum swings too far another way. We need to bring it back and keep it balanced. And we need our men to stand with us when we stand for this, you could call it civil disobedience. When we are civil disobedience is when you stand up against unjust laws. We're not after overturning all laws, because we understand that freedom has been already granted to us. And in the law of love, in our Declaration of Independence, we have that freedom. It's just been hidden from us. God codified that love and put it in 10 commandments. And it was still hidden from us. Those 10 commandments have given us freedom. Over time, freedom is expanded. And we stand now in that freedom, a unified body. When you stand for freedom, you should expect persecution. There will always be those who want to keep you in slavery. It's a natural consequence. Just as it happened in the civil rights movement in the 20th century, it's going to happen in our time. So what does equality look like? It looks like slavery. It looks like us serving one another, looking after our spouse's interests more than our own, looking after our brothers and sisters in the church more than our own. Key word is also. We take care of ourselves, we also take care of others. God is freeing, delivering his people. When he freed them from Babylon, they were all happy and wanted to go back to Jerusalem, didn't they? No, because they were very comfortable in Babylon. Why were they comfortable in Babylon? God had told them to be. Stay there. It's not time. You need to build your houses, make yourselves comfortable. What's the key word? Time. When the time came, it was time to go to Jerusalem and be uncomfortable. That was a fun decision, wasn't it? Pack up all your things on a cart. Go back to ruins. Fix the mess that was in Jerusalem. How many chose to do it? A remnant. It's hard work being free. It's hard work to set our people free. But God has raised us up deliverers. We've first got to deliver ourselves. We've got to move away from the comfort of Laodiceanism, the comfort of conservatism, and stand with those that are fighting for liberty. So what we've done this week is we've looked at the external. We spent 4 days looking at the external. We've spent one session looking at the internal, or the application. Don't be in a hurry to make application. The more you dig the literal, the more you'll understand the spiritual. God has guaranteed us freedom. Let's stand together to fight for that freedom. While he died to make men holy, let us live to make men free. While truth is marching on. Progressive. Let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, you've placed us this week amongst your beautiful creation. It has testified to us of your love. We acknowledge, Lord, that we don't understand love. Therefore, we don't understand how you work and how you think. But we want to learn. We thank you for your laws. They protect us. Help us, Lord, to protect our brothers and sisters. To not just be devoted to you and your truth, but to understand we are our brother's keeper. Lord, I pray that there be no more fanaticisms that divide us, that are set laws that are not according to love, but are according to fear, that are the creation of Satan. May we see them from what they are and recognize them and run from them. May we grow in the progressiveness of the light that is coming and be prepared to stand with our fellow human beings to fight for their liberty as well and to show them the God of liberty. We praise you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.